In today's show, an eventful night one of the NBA draft for the Blazers. They kick things off with a major trade, and then they stand pat and get their guy at number 7. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? Your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. It's Locked On Blazers, your team every day. It was a big night one in the NBA draft for the Portland Trailblazers. They stood pat at 7, didn't trade up, didn't trade out, didn't go anywhere, and still got their guy, the long-coveted, long-rumored big man from UConn, Donovan Clingan, is coming to Portland. The Fighting Pinwheels got exactly who they wanted at number 7. And even before all of that happened, they made a big splash, sending out serious draft capital to the Washington Wizards to acquire young wing Deni Avdija. We're going to get into all of that. A fun night for night one of the NBA draft. For one, I kind of missed the chaos of having the second round drag on a little bit and being like, who's picking? Who's got what picks? But it did move a little bit quicker and was a little less onerous for those of us who have to make a podcast. So we're through night one of the NBA draft. We're going to start with talking Clingan, the sort of drama surrounding that pick, how I think he fits and what it means for the Blazers in the immediate and medium term. And then we'll talk the Deni Avdija trade. The Blazers sent out Malcolm Brogdon and some 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks. Reportedly, all the trade is not finalized and has not been made official yet by either team as I'm recording this, but they sent out, a big package to get Deni Avdija. We'll talk about what that means, what the deal looks like, and what Avdija is going to bring, and kind of why the Blazers would make the move they made. Let's start with Clingan though, and the draft, because that's what it is today. This is draft night. Even though these things happened in out of order, the trade was reported first, but the pick is official. Let's start there. So the Blazers, they're long rumored to be interested in Donovan Clingan. I think it's been reported by several outlets that the Blazers, I know it was reported by several outlets and shared with you here on this very program that the Blazers had strong reported interest in Donovan Clingan. It was very clear that was one of their main targets, right? It was rumored that they had, talked to Houston about trading up to 3, and that they would maybe discuss with Detroit or Charlotte about moving up to 5 or 6 to make sure that they could get their guy. But there was also some reporting that Memphis long coveted Clingan as well, and they have like a more obvious. They're just like a further along as a competitive team, and have this glaring need for another big man. And then maybe especially like a low minute defensive and rebounding big man is kind of exactly what they need to kind of shore up some of their deficiencies. And so there was, once the draft started, a little bit of juice about what the Blazers were going to do. Not really at 1 and 2. It was pretty clear that Zachary Reese-Sachet was going to go 1 to Atlanta, and then Alex Sarr, who kind of angled himself to DC, ends up in DC at 2, and then the intrigue really starts. 3, kind of 4 with San Antonio, but 3, 5, and 6, it starts to be like, okay, these are big moments for the Blazers. What are they going to do? Are we going to find out that there's a trade reported? Or is Houston just going to make their pick? And Houston makes their pick. They take Reed Sheppard at 3. Stephon Castle goes 4. And then Detroit and Charlotte back-to-back at 5 and 6. And this is where it really gets intriguing. Detroit kind of was the first truly surprising pick of the draft. It was basically chalk to that point. Many prognosticators had those first 4 picks dead to rights. And then you get to Detroit, and I'd mentioned a bunch of times on this program that it's like, with a brand new regime. They don't have a coach, but it's like a brand new front office with Trajan Langdon. It's like Detroit's such a wild card. They could do anything. And they end up going Ron Holland, a bit of a surprise at 5. But they don't trade. Okay, so the Blazers are still in line to get their guy, right? It's very clear that to me that in terms of like realistic picks, Donovan Clingan is the Blazers' preferred choice, right? He's the guy they're hoping falls. Not any, they would maybe go some other directions, but if Clingan is on the board at 7, it was abundantly clear from the reporting, particularly from ESPN, that it was abundantly clear if Clingan was there at 7, that's where he was going to be a Portland Trailblazer. 5 is Ron Holland. 6, it gets juicy. Jake Fisher reports that Charlotte and Memphis are working on a trade and it's a done deal. Then he backtracks. Actually, Charlotte's still working on it. Then while he's backtracking, Charlotte's still working on a deal with Memphis. Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN's like during this same 5-minute periods, he sends out a tweet that says, actually, another team to watch trying to trade up to 6 is also the Portland Trailblazers. So that means Memphis and Portland are both on the phones working with Charlotte's new front office and saying, hey, can we strike a deal? We'd love to. Memphis is trying to leapfrog Portland, and Portland's trying to keep Memphis back and say, okay, we'll actually make these trades up and we'll make these moves. We'll make a move and see if we get there. Instead, nope. Not going anywhere. Woj reports Charlotte's staying pat. Jake Fisher reports Charlotte's staying pat. Shams jumps up in there and says, actually, they're taking Tidjane Salah. It was reported earlier in the night by Kristen Peak of Yahoo Sports that Salah was getting interest and traction at 6 from the Hornets. And sure enough, Charlotte goes with Salah at 6, which means the Blazers are on the clock. Clingan is there, and bang, the pick is made, and the Blazers get Donovan Clingan. Woo-hoo-hoo. It was a spicy little 6-minute run. That's the fun part of the draft, right? I think some people don't like the tipping picks and the tweeting and all that stuff. I like it. I don't mind it at all. I find it an enjoyable way to follow the draft. Maybe I'm the perfect mid-range millennial. Maybe I'm the perfect age to enjoy it. To me, it's a perfectly entertaining way to I enjoyed that little stretch of tracking the draft online and having the juice from seeing if the Blazers were going to get their guy, and they do. So the Blazers get Clingan. Donovan Clingan, if nothing else, is gigantic. In socks at the NBA Combine, he measured north of 7'1" with a 9'6" standing reach. It's 240 pounds, one of the best defenders in college basketball last season, a back-to-back national champion at UConn, and had a really, really good run through the NCAA tournament to close out his college career. I know Zach Edey scored 37 in the NCAA final. Choose your own adventure on what happened in that game. I've weighed in enough. So I think I've said here a bunch on the show, and I'll reiterate here, is like when I was going through who my picks would be, I said that when I kind of did the exercise of the most realistic picks that I thought would still be there, that's Clingan was my preferred choice. And that was over Cody Williams, who was still on the board and ended up going 10 to Utah. That was over Matches Pizzelles, who ended up going to Chicago. And that Ron Holland was the other guy I had on that list, and he was already gone. So it's like Dalton Connect. Maybe if you were really a Dalton Connect guy, he was still there. He ended up slipping a little bit and going to the Lakers in the teens. But I said, like, Clingan would probably be my pick of the realistic choices that are going to be there at 7. I think he's my top pick because I'm comfortable with him being an NBA defender. I think he's going to be pretty good on defense. He brings just a level of rim protection. He is not a scheme versatile big. He's a giant person. There's some realistic and real concerns about his lateral quickness. I think he moves pretty well for someone who is 7'2", 250, 7'2", 240. But he's not. That doesn't make him quick. It just means he maybe has better lateral movement in the game and better like recovery speed and sort of his processing speed allows to make up for some of his slow foot speed. He's better at that than other players his size, but he's not particularly quick. I think there's some concerns about his foot speed. He's mostly going to be a drop big, right? He's going to guard the rim. There's real value in guarding the rim. The most important thing that teams still do in the NBA is prevent layups, and I think Donovan Clingan will prevent layups. I think he's going to be fine at that. He's a pretty darn good passer, and UConn's offense is relatively complex, and he was a hub out of the elbows and a high post hub as a passer and a dribble handoff guy. I think he's going to be an interesting playmaker in the NBA. I think that translates. I am worried, and I've said this a bunch, and this is consistent with my thinking on Clingan for the last month. I don't know exactly what else he's going to do on offense. He's not this like crazy leaper, but he's big enough that he's he can catch lobs, but he's not going to like jump up to 15 feet or whatever. He's just like, he's a normal above the rim threat for someone who's 7'2". He'll be okay in that respect, but he's not like this super fast end-to-end speed demon. He's not going to play at really high speed. He doesn't have any shooting range. There's been some reporting, particularly from Jonathan Givony of ESPN, that Clingan has shot well from the outside in drills or in during the workout season, the workout sessions. I don't care about that. Like, I don't care about dudes shooting well in open gym sessions. If he eventually becomes a guy who shoots threes and is like a true threat as a 5-out shooter from three, sure, we'll get there. But he need that includes accuracy and volume. Right now, he has neither, and he's been a bad free throw shooter. So it's not like it's like an obvious, oh well, he shot. So he's like a under 60% free throw shooter for his collegiate career. His impact is going to be on defense, and his impact is going to be as a passer. But I would argue that it is more important for centers to be impactful as rebounders, defenders, and as playmakers than it will be for them to be good offensive players. He can get garbage buckets. He'll be okay as a role man, as sort of like a role man in simple reads and stuff. And I think, but his impacts will be felt in the ways that I think centers are most valuable. Additionally, I'm concerned a little bit about his offense. I'm very comfortable with him being an impactful defender in the long term. I think he's going to be just like straight up good as a defender in the NBA. His ceiling, I think, will be a little bit on how he can mitigate some of his offensive weaknesses. Not like, can he shoot threes? I think that is like just not really a concern. It's, can he be Kevon Looney on offense? Can he be a really good dribble handoff player? And can he run like simple pin down, roll to the rim dunk type of plays? Can he get players open with setting physical screens? Can he make plays? Like, it's not necessarily his scoring. The other thing that, like, in general, why I mentioned this in a bunch of shows, and I'll say it again here, is if you're just tuning in now, welcome. If you're a new listener, shout out to my everydayers. Appreciate y'all rocking with me as long as you do 5 days a week, wherever, free on all platforms, including YouTube. But like, drafting a single position player in the modern NBA comes with some risks. It is not a truly positionless league, but it is a league that prioritizes skill and versatility. And Clingan is not the most highly skilled player in the draft in terms of like dribble, pass, shoot skills. And he's a one position player. He's a center, and he's a true center, and his value will be being gigantic and protecting the rim. But there is a relative lack of upside in drafting a straight center. Size always matters. It hasn't gone out of style. Being big will still be valuable for Donovan Clingan, but I do have some pause about his offensive upside and his overall, and just in general, like, taking a center with the 7th pick in the NBA draft in 2024. That said, the reason why I've been comfortable with him at 7, the reason why I said he was probably my choice, doing the exercise, is because I'm comfortable with his floor. I'm comfortable with his impact. And clearly the Blazers are deeply comfortable with him. Joe Cronin told reporters after the draft at his press conference, his media availability, that they liked Clingan after year 1, after his freshman season at UConn. The scouts were all over him, and they tracked him very closely throughout the year. This was the dude they wanted, and they went and got him. But it's weird, because I already have DeAndre Ayton. And it just, when you have single position players, it forces you to make a choice. This pick comes with some changes that are going to be necessary down the line. Let's talk about the inevitability that is coming for your Trailblazers in the second segment. Then we'll talk a little Deni Avdija to close the show. Join me there, won't ya? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by Gametime. It's the place for last-minute tickets. It's the app that rewards you if you're a procrastinator. If you're a procrastinator, how about this? The Portland Timbers got a soccer match on Saturday at Providence Park. They host Minnesota United FC. The Loons are going to be in town. And right now, you can get a ticket in the Timbers Army. That's a GA ticket in the TA. You can stand, you can sing, you can play in the smoke when the Timbers score for $23 right now on the Gametime app. $23. Go get in the building. One of the great fan experiences in all of the Northwest, standing with your brothers and sisters, your brethren and sistren in the Timbers Army. Gametime is the spot for last-minute tickets because it rewards you for procrastinating. So you're listening to this on Thursday. Well, the game's on Saturday, and if you wait, You could save up to 60% on last minute tickets, or you can just go ahead and take advantage of those flash deals like $23 in the Timbers Army. So take out the guesswork of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You'll get $20 off your first purchase. If that's your first purchase, you could go to the Timbers match for very little money. Again, terms apply. Create an account. Use the redemption code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices. Guaranteed. All right. So Donovan Clingan, I like him. I like the pick. There's some obvious caveats, but I think the things that he's good at. I want to worry about his strengths as opposed to his like perceived future skills. Like he's gonna shoot threes. Who cares? Like the things that he actually does well. Be gigantic, protect the rim. Those are valuable. Blazers were one of the worst rim protection teams in the league last year. They were a pretty competitive defense, but never a really good one. And for a while, they kind of hung around as a competitive defense with some good shooting luck. And when that shooting luck went away, they were kind of just a normal bad defense. But I would say they improved. They took steps in the right direction, but they still have some obvious flaws. And Clingan steps into being someone who can answer those questions eventually. Clingan wasn't a big minute guy in college. He was a very low minute guy his freshman year in college as a backup. And then his sophomore season, it wasn't like he was playing 30 some minutes a night. He was not Zach Edey playing like every single minute of the NCAA tournament. He was playing, they had quality backup big man behind him. They went super small sometimes with no center, including at the end of the national championship game. Clingan was a guy who was playing, half the game, a little more than half the game, even at the college level. He is not going to morph into a dude as a rookie who plays 28 to 32 minutes a night. I think it's very reasonable to imagine him to be a 16 to 18 minute a night player during his rookie season, which means that there is no need whatsoever to trade the player in front of him. And that player is DeAndre Ayton. Real quick on Clingan's strengths. I want to be clear here. I don't think he has a lot of scheme versatility. I think he'll be okay. Like every team switches more than you want them to in the league. Even if teams run a drop coverage, there's sometimes like the way players snake and they get space, they can force a late switch where it's like the defense didn't want to switch, but then you have to have a late switch. You're going to get caught guarding smaller players, and Clingan might struggle there. But he's going to be a drop big and he's going to protect the rim. It's the most valuable thing. You look at a guy like Derek Lively for the Mavs. Even he's a lot like more quick laterally, and it's just much more like spry and bouncy. Very different player than Donovan Clingan. But his real value was protecting the rim, and the Mavs found really creative ways to make sure he was the low man. They would just keep rotating off the ball, low. Let's make sure he's low. They were really intentional about the way that they did things there. And Derek Lively, incredibly impactful. If the Blazers can be really intentional about keeping Donovan Clingan around the rim, he can be incredibly impactful. But he's going to play a low minute role in year one because the Blazers are just going to keep DeAndre Ayton for now. But here's the thing. When you trade for a guy at 7, when you draft for a guy at 7, he's not a career backup, right? At some point, you want him, he is a starter, right? You draft him to be your starting center of the future. And DeAndre Ayton is under contract for this season and next season. And it puts them in an awkward situation where eventually, obviously, the Blazers have made their decision, much like when you draft Scoot Henderson, you make your decision. This is a player you're invested in. There's organizational investment in that player. There's organizational investment in Donovan Clingan. Joe Cronin was asked about it twice at his press conference. He kind of one time skirted the question. The other time he's just basically rookies need time. There's no reason. We really like DeAndre, and there's no reason to do that now. But the real truth is that the clock has started on DA's future. It's a little bit weird because when you traded Damian Lillard, the prize piece, the headline piece that you get back in the Damian Lillard trade was DeAndre Ayton. And now, less than a year after acquiring him, you have drafted someone behind him that is likely to take his role and make his future, his medium-term future, or his future with the Blazers in question. Very unlikely. Would the Blazers re-sign or DeAndre Ayton to a contract heading into after drafting Donovan Clingan? I doubt it. Would they offer him an extension next summer heading into his final season after drafting Donovan Clingan? Almost certainly not, right? This means that DA, well, I think it'd be very unlikely and like downright irresponsible to trade him and like have Clingan and Duop Reith and Robert Williams be your center group heading into the season. It's like, it's pretty clear that there is going to come a moment into the not so distant future in which the Blazers have to explore trading DeAndre Ayton, and that future could come as soon as the trade deadline, but more likely next summer, next draft cycle, kind of the way they did with Malcolm Brogdon this summer, where it was like, okay, we're not going to, when he's heading into his final year of his contract, we're going to get something for him, and they do it. They don't have to do it in July. It's not a pressing issue. It's not going to be a thing that comes up during the year. It's going to be valuable to have DeAndre Ayton during the year. I'll just say this now. I don't think Donovan Clingan and DeAndre Ayton can play together. They might be able to play some freaky deaky lineups where you get away with it for a little bit in very small sample sizes, but very small serving sizes, I should say. But like, the idea that that's a long-term solution or even a big minute solution for the short term is wild to me. The Blazers have experimented with playing Duop Reith and very briefly Rob Williams next to DeAndre Ayton, and they just got cut up on defense. They just couldn't stop anyone. Ayton is pretty mobile for a center, but he's not pretty mobile for all of the other spots. And if you have two non-mobile guys that you can pick on and put in pick and rolls, it's just too hard to cover. And even if you don't, having another guy on this as kind of your helper, X-out switch guy helping on the backside, it's tough. It's tough. You need a special kind of defense to do that. And I think, is there a world in which they can kind of get away with it a little bit? Sure. Is there a world where they can do it a bunch? Absolutely not. Your friends are going to pitch this to you. Your friends are going to pitch the Twin Towers idea. And you can just point them to like the 22-minute mark of this podcast and say, no, no, I don't think it'll work. I don't think it'll work. And I don't think it's the plan. I don't think it's worth even entertaining. The real truth is that the Blazers drafted DeAndre Ayton's replacement, and over the next 36 months, they will work to make sure that replacement is ready to go and ready and developing the right way so he can be that replacement, and then they'll move on from DA. And tonight marked the beginning of the end of DeAndre Ayton's Blazers future, whether the team is ready to admit it. It's very clear what happened tonight. And I think that might be fine if Clingan hits. Otherwise, it's a problem. Although I would say in general, if you have to give DeAndre Ayton like $45 million a year, I would not sign up for that one necessarily. But that's me. You might be different. And maybe the Blazers do something wild. But the Blazers did make a trade today for a veteran. They did move off a veteran in the final year of his contract, much like I believe they will do with the DeAndre Ayton here in about a year, 1 year from now. They traded Malcolm Brogdon to the Wizards for Deni Avdija, in a trade that I like on its face because I like Deni Avdija. I like him. He's a 23-year-old 6'9" wing who can dribble, he can pass, he can defend, and he can shoot a little bit. That's the ideal player in the modern NBA, right? Is a big ball handler playmaker who can defend and shoot. That's the ideal position everyone's after. But the Blazers paid a pretty penny. It wasn't cheap to acquire the player everyone's after. And it's a little bit peculiar that a team in the Blazers' position made the trade that they did. It's a little bit peculiar. It's notable the price they paid. Let's talk about that price and what they did in the third segment. Join me there, won't ya? Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Okay, so here is the trade. Here's the deal. Here is what happened. The Blazers send Malcolm Brogdon along with the 14th pick in the draft tonight. Ended up being Bub Carrington from Pittsburgh, along with the least favorable of one of their 2029 picks plus 2 future second-round picks. We haven't gotten clarity on what those 2 future second-round picks will be, but it seems pretty clear that they're not in this particular draft, but they are down the line somewhere. So Malcolm Brogdon, the 14th pick in 2024, the least favorable of the 2029 picks. So the Blazers have the Bucks pick and the Boston Celtics pick from remnants of the Damian Lillard and then the Drew Holiday trade. And they will give the worst of those two in 2029. So the Wizards and the Blazers will keep the best of those two in 2029, and then 2 future seconds. Blazers send all that to Washington, and in return, the Blazers get Deni Avdija. I like this in theory, right? Like I because I like Avdija, but it's undeniable that it's a lot. It's a lot. And it is somewhat curious to me that the Blazers in the position they were in would trade 2 firsts and 2 seconds for a role player, a high-end role player. Like I like Avdija a lot. I think he could play with anybody. He could play on the ball. Like he's a pretty good shooter, but if you look at his splits, what he is an elite shooter from the corner. Shot 48% from the corners and not nearly as well, under 32% from above the break. So it's like non-corner threes. It's pretty good, but like in the corners, which is like you don't dribble into corner threes. Those are catch and shoots, and they're typically more open, but those are off-ball shots. Like as an off-ball guy, he lit it up. He made basically almost nearly half of his threes, according to Cleaning the Glass, from the corners. Like he can play those positions. He can run. He can be an on-ball guy. He's good in the open floor, so he could play fast in a version of some miracle version of the Blazers that plays fast. They told us they were going to do that last year. They played incredibly slow. But like I think you're getting value in Avdija. On top of all that, he's on a 4-year contract. He signed a contract. He was the 8th pick, or excuse me, he was the 9th pick in the 2020 draft. He's coming off a season in which he averaged 14.7 points, 7.2 boards, and 3.8 assists. It's clearly the best year of his career. And prior to that, he signed a rookie extension for 4 years and $55 million on a contract that declines. So it gets lower each and every year. It's one of the most team-friendly deals in the NBA for an effective two-way wing who can shoot and pass. That's a really good deal on its face. It's just kind of expensive. It really does speak to like the general value of Malcolm Brogdon as a trade piece. Not very good. not particularly good. I would say there wasn't they basically had to add on 2nd-round picks because Malcolm Brogdon wasn't valuable enough, right? 2 firsts, 2 seconds, and Brogdon. It's just a lot. And for a rebuilding team to send out future draft capital to get an interesting role player is a little bit weird. Now, Avdija checks a lot of boxes. Like I don't even mean this trade is bad. I just think it's notable how much the Blazers had to pay to get Avdija. But I like him. Like he's I'm a pretty big believer. I think he's a good decision maker. I think he's a good decision maker at high speed. I think he's a pretty good decision maker in half court. Like I like him. It's just, and he checks a lot of boxes for the Blazers. He can just play like interchangeably. He's probably a 4 because of his foot speed on defense, but he's physical on defense. Like I like his physicality there. He's just like he's not super fast laterally where he could guard like really quick wings. So he's probably better guarding like the slower of the 2 wings, which is kind of also what Jeremy Grant is. But I think you could get away with playing them both together at the sort of interchangeable forward spots. And I think his rebounding will help a little bit. He's not an elite rebounder, but he's okay rebounder. I think playing him next to Toumani Camara gives you a lot of optionality, and playing a wing, like a 3-wing rotation of Toumani, Jeremy, and Avdija, along with like a little bit of mixed in Shaedon Sharpe playing some minutes at the 3 guard lineups. You got a lot. I really feel a lot more comfortable about that wing trio and that grouping being more competitive than any version that includes a lot of Jabari Walker and a lot of Chris Murray and any of Ryan Rupert. Like I just think you're better there. Jabari Walker's better battling for minutes on the fringes than he is getting guaranteed minutes each night, just because of his offensive struggles right now in his game. And if he earns it, and that's a good problem to have. Avdija is going to help, and he's young. He's younger than Dalton Connect. Like, you traded for a player under team control for 4 more seasons on a salary that decreases over the next 4 years, who is younger than a player you could have drafted at number 7 and a player who is available at 14. Like the Blazers, if they don't make this trade, stand pat at 14, they trade a player who is, I would argue, just like projects to probably be worse overall in his career in Connect and is older than Avdija. In that lens, incredibly good deal. And if you traded 14 and Malcolm Brogdon for Avdija, it would have been an incredible home run. It's the future pick that I think is dicey. Perhaps the Celtics will be good forever, and that pick will be like it'll be the 28th pick in 2031, and you won't even really care about it in the end. But there's a chance that, if things go haywire, then the Blazers could be trading a juicy pick. And moreover, it's a pick you could either trade or use to get other stuff. And at some point, the Blazers expect to be good, and having a cache of future picks that you can trade to continue to add to the stable of talent, either as a trade upgrade or just as, hey, we're going to need picks because we're good and expensive now. It's always important to have sort of down the line. You look at a move like the Spurs did today, where they traded the 8th pick in this draft for just a future 2031 pick. Like, hey, let's take a gamble and say, like, in the middle of Wemby's prime, let's just have another draft pick on hand. That type of thing. Obviously, the Spurs are in a different spot because Wemby's in another stratosphere, but like that's the same thinking. On its face, though, Avdija really, really checks boxes that the Blazers needed. A big, like, 6'9", physical wing who can dribble. They desperately need someone who could dribble. They're really light on playmakers. He adds another secondary playmaker to the group, and he's a shooter from the corners. Valuable. And he's pretty cheap. Valuable. It's just the price you paid was hefty. And I think some of the price you paid is because of the team control, because of how favorable that contract is. You're trading for someone like on like a rookie, basically essentially a rookie scale deal, except no restricted free agency at the back half of it, and guarantees as opposed to team options, but like 4-year team control for a 23-year-old forward who averaged 15 and 7 in the NBA last year. It's pretty good business, albeit a hefty price. I think what Deni grows into will help justify it, right? If he maintains kind of like if he's like a 15-8 guy for all 4 of the seasons and is like an effective high-level role player, then maybe it's like, 2 firsts for that was kind of a lot. But if he grows from this, if he's more than that, if he continues to grow, and at 23 you can continue to grow, it might change my opinion on this in a hurry. I would say, in a nutshell, the same way I feel about Clingan. A guy that I was comfortable with, a guy that I probably would, if I had I would have made the same decision if I was on the clock, but I still have some reservations. I feel the same way about this trade. I really like Avdija. I've really enjoyed watching him. I'm going to really enjoy watching him in a Blazers uniform. He's a guy who Monty Morris nicknamed Turbo because he used to just hold down the turbo button and just power himself to the rim. During his 3rd NBA season, he just only pressed 2 buttons, turbo and square. Monty Morris is a PlayStation guy, so he only pressed turbo and shoot. But I think he's progressed beyond being just a turbo guy to having multiple speeds, although he probably is best at playing at full speed. So I like him, and I think my sort of the value of it, I think, can change, although admittedly it feels like a steep price to pay for what it is, and a bit of a weird one considering where the Blazers are. But a big man that the team highly coveted, and a young 23-year-old wing who checks a bunch of necessary boxes in terms of team need that can grow with the young core of the team, that's a pretty freaking good night. It's a pretty freaking good night. It is imperfect, because it's always imperfect, but the Blazers made an aggressive trade to get a player that really kind of fits what they want to do, and they got their guy in the draft without giving up other assets. All told, I think you come away feeling pretty good about this, and the reservations you have will be answered down the line. Tomorrow is night 2 of the draft. Blazers have 2 picks, 34 and 40. Guess where you can find a breakdown of everything they do right here on this very podcast, free on all platforms and also on YouTube. Come back for that show. We'll wrap up the draft in Friday's program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.